Hi, Mr. Koma.
Hello, Alam.
Hello, hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So we will, hey, hi. So we will start in 2 minutes. So hi everyone, greeting from the virtual conference ASEAN Clean Energy Week. This is Holnam, the project producer of Leader Associates, and I'll be the host of the ASEAN Clean Energy Week on November 26th and November 27th. In the previous 2 days, we've made a really exciting renewable tours around Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia. For today's event, we'll continue our phenomenal renewable tour in the ASEAN region to include more voices from Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar about the future of green energy. And it's truly my great honor to welcome you all on this online ASEAN Clean Energy Week. And I'm so glad to see so many developers, investors, consultants, and experts from all over the world getting involved here today in this event. And also, I would like to remind you that today's virtual conference will also be broadcasted on our YouTube channel and our media partner channel as well. Before we get started, I'd like to provide a few housekeeping items with our speakers and the audience in short. Firstly, who we are. We Leader Associates is a global leading event organizer concentrating on renewable energy. In the past 5 years, we host more than 50 events across Asia Pacific region, South America, Africa, and Europe. Secondly, please kindly find today's brief agenda on this slides. In the morning session, we'll mainly focus on the renewable prospect in Indonesia. 3 informative speeches focusing on renewable potentials, bankability of the large-scale solar project will be presented in this morning. After the morning session, we will travel to Malaysia and Myanmar to explore the development of these 2 countries. And a discussion regarding the Myanmar 1 gigawatt tender will be made in panel discussion as well. Thirdly, I would like to introduce our exclusive one-on-one meeting platform. This meeting platform facilitates the building business connection and partnership by our online chat box. And our super user-friendly event matchmaking service is incredibly simple to use as well. Please take your time and explore more partnership in this one-on-one meeting platform. At last, all our audience are welcome to raise questions to our speakers. As you can find, there's a Q&A box on your control panel, and we will select 1 or 2 questions for our speakers to answer after their presentation if time is allowed. And very much appreciate your attention and patience, and this is pretty much all about the guidance. And now we'll begin today's knowledge sharing with a virtual roadshow. For the first panel of this morning, we would like to start with a really interesting panel discussion focusing on the 10 gigawatt renewable energy growth potentials. And Mr. Daniel Morrow from Societe Generale will be the moderator of this panel discussion. Daniel is currently the Managing Director, Head of Energy, Infrastructure, and Metal Minings of Asia Pacific region. He's also the co-head of the bank's wider natural resources and energy group of the Asia Pacific region. Hi, Daniel. The floor is open for you right now, so please take control of this panel discussion.
Thank you, Olnam, and welcome everybody. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today at the ASEAN Clean Energy Week to discuss, in particular, Indonesia, which is the largest market in this sub-region in ASEAN. So we will have a lot to talk about as Indonesia is seeking to accelerate its energy transition and push more into developing renewables. I think we have a very strong panel today with really 3 investors coming from different backgrounds, having different expertises and knowledge sharing from other parts of the world with both Aqua Solar, Clean Tech Solar, and Berkeley Energy. So we'll have a great point of view from investors, what is attracting them to Indonesia, what can they bring to accelerate the energy transition in that country. I will represent the banking side of the discussion. So as an introduction, very quickly, I'm an energy banker at Societe Generale. We're very focused as an institution on financing the energy transition and the renewable energy sector. Our portfolio of investment ranges from onshore wind, offshore wind, solar, floating solar, geothermal, and hydro. Here I represent the energy practice in Asia Pacific, and our practice here is mainly active in markets like Australia, Taiwan, Japan, Indonesia, India, China, Laos. More specifically in Indonesia, what are we doing and what have we done? We have invested in several hydropower projects ranging in sizes from 40 megawatts to 200 megawatts in Sumatra primarily. We have more recently, earlier this year, financed a couple of solar projects for Berkeley Energy, and Joost will talk to us about that. We have also financed a sizable geothermal project in Indonesia called Sarula, 320 megawatts of geothermal capacity in Sumatra again. And a little bit outside of renewables, but still arguably part of the energy transition. We have financed an LNG to power project called Java 1 that will seek to bring a more gas-fired generation into the energy matrix. So that's a little bit of footprint in terms of what we're doing in Indonesia. But maybe I'll pass it over to you, Jérôme, to give a quick introduction of your firm and your activities.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, Daniel, and good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm Jérôme Bacot. I'm working for Cleantech Solar for about 4 years now. French citizen, as you can guess, without mentioning it, and having been working in Asia for the last 20 years in the environment sector. So I'm looking after several countries for Cleantech Solar, including Indonesia. Basically, Cleantech Solar is just focusing on one single business, which is to generate and supply and sell solar electricity to corporate clients only. So we have been doing this for the past 5 years. In the South Asia region, we are now in 7 countries, India, and 6 countries in Southeast Asia. We have grown quite significantly with the pretty high demand from corporate consumer for renewable energy, to achieve their sustainability targets. And today we have a signed portfolio of a bit more than 500 megawatts with these corporate clients. So Indonesia is actually the last country in the region that we got into. So it's a pretty new adventure for us in this kind of new market. I mean, we will talk more in detail about the penetration of renewable energy today in Indonesia and all the regulatory framework. And I mean, it's definitely a market that is changing at the moment, and we can see, many opportunities and big potential in this country for renewable energy penetration.
Thank you, Jérôme. Joost, over to you for a quick introduction of your firm and your activities.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be on this panel discussion today. My name is Joost van Acht. I am responsible at Berkeley for origination and development activities across Asia Pacific. Berkeley is a fund manager that is specialized in renewable energy, and we invest across 10 countries in Asia and Africa. We've been active in Asia for over a decade. Indonesia has over the last few years really been a focus country for us. Our first investment was in 2015. We currently have platforms in hydropower with operating assets. We have about 300 megawatts in development as well. Solar market has been a focus area for us. As Daniel alluded to, we developed and constructed 2 of the first solar utility scale projects in the country, still in a global context, relatively small, around 22 megawatt peak. But 2 of the larger projects in the market currently. And the last segment that we investing quite heavily in is commercial industrial energy applications that covers rooftop solar, similar to Cleantech. But we're also active in industrial heat and energy efficiency through, for example, biomass. So we provide clean heat energy for industrial application. Indonesia it's for us, we are quite bullish on the market. We're investing quite heavily in development, and quite happy to share our view on what we think will happen in the next few years.
Thank you, Joost. And Pacoman, over to you for an introduction of Aqua Solar.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. So yeah, my name is Komang. I'm the head of solution for in Aqua Indonesia. So Aqua is actually the IPP independent power producer that really focus only on the renewable energy sector. So our main technology includes solar, wind, hydro, and also biomass. And recently, we have also the diversification in the product and solution as well. So we see that there is a demand of these containerized solar PV and also the growing demand in terms of the energy storage, particularly talking about the Indonesian context on the hybrid solution. This is one of the key that we want to also focus in Indonesia. So we have an extensive portfolio in terms of the hybrid solution that include the energy storage as well. So in terms of the investment, we have invested more than 2.5 billion US dollar, and we are actually an integrated player. So focusing starting from the project development from scratch, and then finance the project and perform the construction, and perform also the operation and maintenance of our asset. So our target is the long-term investment, and we see Indonesia is one of the major potential countries as well. We've been here since 2013 and focusing developing on these four major technology. Currently, we have one operating asset in East Kalimantan, which is the hybrid solution, one of the biggest, I would say, hybrid power plant in Indonesia currently, serving the electricity for community, this is also the context of Indonesia, where now the electrification ratio is still quite low, particularly on east part of Indonesia, that we want also contribute on the sector. So I think that's the short introduction from my side. Daniel, thank you.
Thank you for that. So I think it's great that we have panelists here that are able to draw from expertise in other markets. Jerome, you mentioned 7 markets in the region. Joost, you mentioned more than 2 handful of markets. So how do you see Indonesia as an investment destination? What is drawing you to that market? Is it the size of the market? Is it do you see a clear acceleration in terms of development of renewables? It's also a fragmented market. You know, there's a number of subsegments in this sector. Are you focusing on one particular area or 2 particular areas in the sector, and why? Who would like to start us off?
I'm quite happy to go first. So for Barclay, I think, and this is maybe not a tremendously new insight, but the fundamentals of Indonesia are quite good. So we have the scale of the market, both in terms of population and growth. Also, we see that the fit with renewables is quite good. There are very good natural resources, particularly in hydro, solar, as well as a need for competitive power versus the current generation mix, which in many areas in Indonesia still consists of rather expensive diesel or oil-fired installations. So on a macro level, that all looks good. We came in 5 years ago with that view, and progress has been relatively slow compared to some of the other markets. But we still believe in that market, and we do see that there's an acceleration recently in terms of the thinking around regulations. What I think from our perspective has been missing a bit is the coordination between private sector, the regulatory side and PLN, but that seems to be coming together currently, and we see that there's quite good opportunity now. As our focus is on hydro, solar and commercial industrial, those are really the sectors where we see the main potential, and particularly in solar, there seems to be quite a lot moving currently.
Yeah, if I can comment on my side, so again, Cleantech Solar much more focusing on the commercial and industrial clients, and with a solar solution. What we see and the potential and why we are attracted to the Indonesian market. I mean, first, as you said in your intro, Daniel, I mean, Indonesia is the biggest country in the Southeast Asia region. and actually the biggest as well and the highest industrial electricity consumption. We, in parallel, when we look at Jokowi willingness and intention to attract more and more foreign direct investment in Indonesia, we believe that the industrial market and industrial key MNCs are going potentially to install their new plants, new operating industrial sites in Indonesia. So that creates an even bigger market for us. In parallel, I mean, when we all know the demand for renewable energy from the corporate clients, you know, I always like to look at the indicator of the number of members in the RE100 organization, starting at 12 members back in 2015, and today I think it's like 270 or something like this. And we think that one of the criteria of selection of the country where these kind of companies are going to install their new industrial plants is, can they have access to renewable energy? And so that's why, I mean, in Indonesia, we are quite optimistic that the regulation will be more and more renewable energy friendly in order to be able to attract these foreign companies to invest in Indonesia and to build their industrial sites. So yeah, definitely huge market and probably even bigger in the future in terms of commercial and industrial presence. A regulatory framework being more and more renewable energy friendly, and we have seen that already with the new regulation since last year, which is allowing us today to service some clients already in Indonesia. I mean, it could be better, but it's definitely better than what it was 2 years ago. Yeah, so definitely all the positive signs, many positive signs and green light towards a bright future for renewable energy in Indonesia for commercial and industrial clients.
Yeah, I think from my side, I think it's almost cover all from the other panelists, right? But just one perspective from our side is actually we see that Indonesia has at least the commitment and the spirit. So it is reflected by the national target of the energy mix. In 2025 is 23% the target. And if we see the potential, there is a lot of study that showing the great potential of Indonesia for renewable energy. I mean, the recent study saying that the market potential is more than 400 gigawatt for renewable energy, but currently we are just 2.5% on implementing this potential, I would say. So there is still more than 90% of potential that can be exercised together from, I mean, by the government and also the private sector. And also there is still a gap in terms of the national target on the renewable energy mix, which is, this is the commitment of the government of Indonesia as well.
Thank you for that. And several of you mentioned the regulatory environment as a key factor. Clearly, we are all long-term investors. Those projects are long-term investments, 20, 25 years at times. Maybe I stay with you, Pak Komang, this time. And but what is your view on the how do you rate the regulatory environment in Indonesia? What else would you like to see in terms of policy direction, if anything? I think Joost, you also mentioned that initially it took some time to develop the initial project. So what are the challenges? What could be improved? Is it on the permitting side? Is it on the PPA procurement side? I'd like to get your thoughts, maybe starting with you, Pak Komang, on regulatory environment and what kind of challenges is the sector facing to accelerate the development?
Yes, sure. I mean, that one that we wanted to highlight also as one of the, I would say, challenges in Indonesia. Yeah. So in terms of the consistency of the regulation itself, we see, as Jerome also mentioned, there is a couple of regulations that already released in Indonesia, which is, I would say, stimulating the renewable energy environment in Indonesia. But in some cases, there is an inconsistency in implementing those renewables, those regulations, I would say. So the part that we really wanted to have a clear and consistent regulation for particularly for renewable energy. We expect also that there is a draft of presidential regulation, particularly on renewable energy, that we see. I think all of us already see on our network that the draft is quite actually promising. But before it is signed, we never know what will be happen on that draft presidential. But at least this is giving also a new atmosphere for the investor and also for the private sector to invest on this renewable energy. And also we know that Indonesia has just also launched this omnibus law, which is also quite breakthrough for Jokowi government now. And there is also a couple, even though there is not specific for renewable energy, but there is a couple of clauses that really stimulate also the, I would say, the investment of renewable energy in Indonesia.
Joost, any thoughts on challenges or regulatory environment?
Yeah, if I can add to that, I fully agree that consistency of the regulations is very important. I think also the coordination with PLN on regulation is quite critical. Like our experience in like in the solar market in particular has been that like three years ago there was a short window where a number of projects went forward, and we were part of that wave of solar projects. Then subsequently regulation changed, and I think that presented a bit of a challenge to PLN to adapt. Then subsequently regulations changes again, and I think those frequent changes in regulations have not been very helpful for the sector. I think what is a bit different now is that there's better coordination, and it seems that both PLN and the Ministry of Energy are aiming for the same direction. So we're quite hopeful that in 2021 the regulations will be in place. I think PLN will have worked out its procurement process, and once there's an opportunity for developers to obtain a PPA, then it's relatively straightforward then to move forward, and projects will be built. But to date, it has been quite limited in availability of PPAs.
Yeah, if I can add on the regulation related to the commercial and industrial clients. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, since last year, there's been a new law implemented in Indonesia, which allows basically PLN customer to self-generate and self-consume solar electricity. So with a behind the meter connection. This new law was, I mean, there has been two steps in a way, because when they implemented the new law back in January 2019, the capacity charge was quite high, and basically killing the competitiveness of the solar electricity. This has been revised down at the end of the year, November 2019, to be more fair, and to have solar electricity being cheaper and more competitive than the grid tariff. So on the on-site corporate PPA, in a way, we could say that the regulation and the market is open only since end of 2019. I mean, what is good about this new law as well is that it sets up very clearly the permits and licenses application process. So it's a very transparent process with pretty tight deadlines, you know, given to the authorities to deliver the permits which is definitely a good thing to know and to have, because otherwise it's always a risk element, not to know when you're going to have the license and the project being delayed because of the administrative response, basically. Net metering is in place as well. It's not 1-for-1, it's at 65%, but still, I mean, it's definitely better than 0% like it still can be in some other countries in Southeast Asia. So many positive things about this new regulation, but yeah, there could be improvement. I mean, it's not a strict PPA per se, because it's more a kind of equipment leasing agreement, because it's a PLN client which is having the authorization from the authorities. But there could be the other areas of improvement that we could see in the regulation for corporate demand is allowing off-site PPA as well, right? Like what we are doing in India and I mean Vietnam probably being the next market with a direct PPA, as they call it over there, to have corporate clients, being able to supply directly their renewable electricity from a private IPP, from a solar farm, let's say, right? So that will bring definitely much more scalability to satisfy the renewable energy demand from corporate. So here there is a big area of improvement in Indonesia, yeah, in terms of regulation.
Yeah, thank you for those perspectives. And I guess from my standpoint as a financial investor, so some of the aspects that we might want to see in terms of fast tracking development of renewables is probably streamlining the approval process. Prioritizing government approvals, environmental permits would be valuable to be able to fast track the development of the industry. Secondly, the tender process with PLN. I think there's a lot of value also in streamlining that. Bidding in tenders is an expensive proposition. It costs money. So when those tenders tend to get postponed or changed over time, it can be a factor that can detract investors. So again, the ability to streamline, to accelerate some of those tender process would go a long way, in my mind, to accelerate the development of renewables. And then the third thing that comes to mind is, sometimes in Indonesia, there are issues around land acquisition, access to land, that also can be problematic for projects and cause delays at times. And there, I think we can maybe take a look at what's happening in India. India has been quite good at having solar parks where the land issue is taken care of. Where the government is making land available to the solar industry, for example, and that has really accelerated the development of the industry. So those are maybe a few things that Indonesia could take a look into in terms of continuing to accelerate the development. Let's move to capital. Let's talk about the availability of capital, competition. You both investing, you both raising capital, both equity and debt capital. How do you see the environment? Is capital readily available to fund your projects? Are you seeing issues given the current climate, COVID-related uncertainties? Has that impacted at all the ability to raise capital for developing your projects? Who would like to start us off on that? Joost, would you like to start?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as an investor in Southeast Asia, we see that there's quite a lot of capital flowing into all these markets. If we look back 5 to 10 years ago, it was quite limited in terms of parties that were investing equity into renewable energy, but that has changed completely with a lot of regional investors from Thailand, from Philippines, Malaysia, looking at other Southeast Asian markets. We also see quite a lot of interest from Indonesian investors these days. So there's quite a lot of competition on the equity side. The challenge in Indonesia has always been the scarcity of projects to invest in. I think on the debt side, there's really the interlinkage between quality of PPA versus the type of debt providers that that are interested in projects. Well, we're working with Société Générale on our solar projects, which have a relatively good quality PPA. But we have seen that for other projects in mini hydro, bankability has been less, and there we rely on local banks to finance. But it comes at a significant increased cost to the projects. So from the perspective of lowering the cost of capital and therefore an ability to offer lower tariffs in the markets, it would be extremely helpful to have the bankability of PPAs across the board improved in Indonesia. And there are good examples of where that has gone well.
Yeah, for clean tech solar, our joint venture partner Shell on the equity side is seeing as well the strong interest and the strong potential of Indonesian market. So definitely supportive of financing our growth in this market. On the debt side, we are not really looking at the local financing as of today, because our approach has always been to leverage on our regional portfolio and regional asset portfolio to get some debt at the holding level. So we secured earlier this year, we secured a loan with ING of $75 million to finance our growth in the six markets where we are present in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. But from what we have seen from the lenders as well, there is quite a strong interest for developing the Indonesian market, even if there are some risk identified, like the currency volatility, for instance.
If I may add, I think I fully agree with Jos saying that there is a lot of capital flowing actually, and really interested to be invested in Indonesia, but we just kind of lack of the bankable project to be financed for that. So I think that's the homework from the stakeholder, in this case PLN, and also the Ministry of Energy, to actually really have the clear strategy in terms of the procurement and also the PPA draft that needs to be bankable in front of the lenders and also from the equity side. And also we see that there is a growing also from the local investor that really wanted to invest in renewable energy. There is a growing interest for that. But because of course, when we talk about financing the project, there is always a trade-off of using the financing from foreign entity or from the local banks or the local investor. Of course, there is a risk of the cost of money from the foreign institution would be fairly low compared to the local, but there is the risk in terms of the forex exchange. And also now with the government really wanted to push for the local industry, putting the local content requirement as one of the requirement in most of the project, with the higher and higher percentage of the local content requirement, that actually push us also to really now consider the local financing. And also now we know that the Central Bank of Indonesia also really reducing the interest rate, that may potential also in impacting on the, I would say, the interest of the loan from the local bank itself.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think from my perspective, I look at really the availability of capital remaining quite strong. This year in particular, we've been to a highly disrupted financing market, particularly in the earlier part of the year. And in my mind, the peak of the disruption in the financial markets was probably the second quarter of this year. But since then, the disruption has largely abated and has normalized. And then secondly, I would argue that even at the peak of the disruption, the renewable energy sector is probably the one segment in the broader energy sector where capital remained readily available. I think your transaction closed just a couple of months ago for one of your projects, so arguably still in a difficult year, but nevertheless, you were able to close your transaction without a major hiccup, at least on the availability of financing side. And I would agree with you a little bit that there is really a supply-demand imbalance, that there is more capital available, really, than opportunities to deploy it quickly. And what worries me a little bit is the risk of seeing some of the projects getting delayed as the environment is now a little bit more uncertain from a demand standpoint, and that capital will struggle to find a room a little bit. Maybe we can talk a little bit about floating solar, whether you see that as an opportunity for a country like Indonesia. There's a couple of projects that are being developed at the moment, including a relatively sizable one in Sumatra that we're involved in on the financing side. Do you think that sub-asset class has a future in Indonesia, and why?
I think from our perspective, we are looking at solar across the board, both in terms of the slightly smaller projects in the eastern part of Indonesia, where we see that there's a clear competitive element to it, where you have that high cost of generation, and where projects in the 5, 10, 20 megawatt range make a lot of sense. At the same time, as an equity investor, and also looking from the perspective of bringing in debt into our project, of course, we also like to reach some scale, and land availability then becomes an issue. So as we see in countries like Vietnam, where we have projects that are 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt, and where people are talking about 1 gigawatt projects, that is quite difficult to implement in Indonesia. Part is the smaller grids cannot absorb it, so you're basically looking at Sumatra and Java, where land availability is difficult, and there I think floating solar feels quite an interesting niche. In terms of the risk of technology, we really don't see that as a major obstacle. So where the regulations support that, we would readily invest in floating solar. And I think testament to that is also the recent tenders that were launched by Indonesia Power, and where you saw that quite competitive rates came out for floating solar projects, going down to 3.6 cents per kilowatt hour. So quite competitive also for PLN.
Yeah, I think I agree with Jus, and we see that also the decreasing price, because I mean one of the major obstacle of the floating solar previously from the capex side is actually the cost of the floaters itself, because it's still quite expensive. But now it almost can be compensated with the decreased price of the floaters, plus the cooling effect that actually given for the floating solar itself. So I think, as Jos mentioned, that in the recent tender launched by Indonesia Power, actually the price per kilowatt hour is really competitive, even though that for conventional ground-mounted solar PV, it's already pretty competitive. And now the question is about is there a lot of I would say the location, the potential for this floating solar, and how we can leverage that. There is also the initiative that to use the X mining, the quarrel for the X mining of the coal to be leveraged for this floating solar as well, and that could be very potential as well. But we need to match also with the PLN allocation for the solar PV itself, because I mean this is considered as the intermittent power plant, which is for the X mining, usually in Kalimantan area, where the grid is still not very strong compared to Java and Sumatra, which maybe can afford more this intermittent power plant.
Thank you. And maybe moving to you, Jerome, on a slightly different topic, since you tend to focus more on distributed generation. We touched very early in the panel on remote areas. Indonesia has, I believe, 7,000 or 8,000 islands. A number of them are not connected to the grid and will never be, in all likelihood. So there is that unmet demand. Do you see that as an opportunity for clean tech solar to provide distributed generation solutions in more remote areas that are currently not served by PLN? Or what are your thoughts on that market?
Yeah, this maybe just before to answer that question, just
sure.
a quick comment on the floating solution. I mean, just to mention that so building rooftop is not the only area we can use to install solar system when we deploy our system on the site of the client. But some industrial sectors, they have big water ponds for their use in their operation, and this is a solution that we can deploy as well to install a solar system in the water pond of the client. Like we have a 10 megawatt for a cement company. I mean, just to make this comment on the off-grid solution. Yes, this is definitely an opportunity. I mean, the cost of battery have gone down quite significantly as well, similarly than the cost of solar module in the recent years. But I would say though that this is not the highest demand that we can see in our pipeline. Highest demand is definitely coming from grid connected industrial sites. And actually, initially we were thinking that this demand will be more coming from MNCs, with a strong sustainability agenda that have to achieve a certain percentage of renewable energy consumption. But we can see a pretty high demand as well from local companies, actually. So yeah, I mean, the off-grid, we are looking at some project. We definitely identify this as an opportunity. But it's not the top priority, I would say, because of a slightly lower demand, and of course a little bit more challenging on the technical side with being off grid and with the installation of the storage and batteries.
Any comment on your side on remote area electrification with solar solutions? Is that something that you're looking at?
Yeah, sure. I think there is two particular elements that quite now become a significant issue, particularly in PLN as well. First is about the rural area electrification, whereas the utility that 100% owned by the government, PLN has the duty actually to electrify even the remote area where they know, or we know that the cost of the generation there would be much higher when we compare to the area where the demand is pretty high, for example in Java and Sumatra. So, and the second one is usually previously PLN is using the conventional generation, diesel generation, and now they have the program of the transformation of PLN. One of them is Green Booster, which is the program is to replace these existing diesel generator to more clean and green energy. And we see that the most I would say promising solution would be the solar plus storage, and this is quite huge potential actually. From the data that they have around 6 gigawatt of existing diesel generator, and this is quite high potential because when we see from the map of the irradiance, when we're talking about the solar, the location where the where these the diesel generator is located is mostly in the location where the irradiance level is pretty high. So it is a coincidence, and also means that this is a great opportunity to actually replace this diesel genset with a more clean and green power plant, which is in this case ACEW is really focusing on as well. We have also the program of 1,000 village electrification, where we exercise a lot of technology, and also a lot of financing arm also to make the project become implementable in front of the community and also from the government, because we know that when we talk about the electrification in rural area, eventually the tariff would be that we can expect would be pretty high compared to the national tariff that's set by PLN. So there should be an entity that fill that gap actually that currently ACEW is working on solving this issue as well. There is a lot of opportunity called PPP project or KPBU in Indonesia, which we can also exercise to actually support this kind of initiatives.
Thank you for that. There's a couple of questions that came in from the audience. Maybe Jerome, you can take the first one. The question is, what are the current limitations on corporate PPAs in Indonesia? And maybe you can draw a parallel with Vietnam, as you alluded to earlier.
Yeah. So I mean, so again, there is no off-site corporate PPA. So here the limitation is this is not existing today in Indonesia. For the on-site solution, is not a straight PPA per se. It's more a rental of solar system to the commercial and industrial clients. So I mean, we are still able to deploy our solution, but it's not a straightforward PPA. I think we haven't mentioned about too much about the omnibus law, the change in regulation, and especially as well on the cancellation of the negative investment list. But this is one of the limitations today that is still applied, where you know, you need to have a certain level of local shareholders to be able to develop some business activities. So it seems that in this omnibus law, they are looking at canceling this negative investment list, and or at least limiting it to a very few sectors like gambling or, you know, this kind of business activities, and to replace it by a positive investment list where, you know, they will give incentive to some business sectors that Indonesia is looking at promoting and developing. So yeah, it's not a perfect regulatory framework yet, but as I said, it's definitely better than 2 years ago, and so there has been some improvement.
Thank you for that. And you actually addressed another question that came through, which is, do we know what's coming in the next draft of the energy regulation? And do we know what the government is planning to do to streamline the development process and increase procurement transparency? We talked a little bit about that earlier in our discussion, but comment on yours, anything you want to add on this? Or
yeah, I think one of the, I would say, most interesting one in the draft of presidential is there is a clause or about the feed-in tariff, particularly for the size of the solar that less than 5 megawatt. So this would be, I would say, one of the game changer, because government of Indonesia through the Ministry of Energy had actually initiated like a couple years ago about this feed-in tariff, but once it is released, after 1 month, it is being cancelled by the new regulation. So this kind of regulation that I would say for the early coming of the renewable energy market, for example, in Indonesia, is really needed actually to stimulate the development and implementation of the renewable energy. So and the other, I would say that there is a couple of clauses that actually could stimulate also the process of the procurement, and hopefully, but for this presidential regulation, there should be a lot of regulation that needs to be formed also from the minister level, interlinked between the Ministry of Energy with the Ministry of Finance, because of the the target to filling gap for the, I would say, the economic tariff versus that the tariff that should be paid by the customer of the PLN. So I think there is still a lot of homework once this presidential regulation is signed, but this is really giving a positive atmosphere in terms of the renewable energy market in Indonesia.
Maybe if I can.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sorry, just thinking about another interesting point in the draft omnibus law for energy. So it's still a draft, right? So, I read that the local content requirements, which could be quite a limitation as well for the deployment of additional renewable energy capacity in Indonesia, especially considering the local manufacturing industry. I read that basically they are looking at not applying the local content requirement until Indonesia has achieved its 23% overall renewable energy target. And we are quite far from the 23%, right? So that could be interesting and less limitation to develop renewable energy that may be included in this new omnibus law.
Thank you for that. Maybe one last question that came in is what's the minimum size to invest in a solar project? If it's 100 kilowatt or 150 kilowatt in Eastern Indonesia, is that something that we would consider, or is it just too small to consider investing in that? And does that mean that biomass may be better solutions for some of those markets in the eastern part of the country?
Maybe I can go. So like our experience with developing smaller solar projects is that despite the streamlining of regulations, etc., that it requires quite a lot of effort for limited capital deployments. Now we see that PLN is looking at this diesel replacement program, which is quite interesting because of the total scale that can be reached of about 2 gigawatts of diesel installations. But if you go down to individual installations, they tend to be 300 kilowatts, 400 kilowatts, up to maybe 1 or 2 megawatts, so relatively small. I think for us the key is really to see how PLN could bundle some of these portfolio companies and then offer them to the market. I think for us, if it would come into as a bundle of about 20 megawatts, but across a large number of locations, then it starts to make sense. But on an individual basis, 150 kilowatt installation is taking too much effort for the reward to get out of that.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time. One topic we did not touch on is storage, combining solar and storage. So maybe that could be your parting comment. And how able do we see that to be in the Indonesian market? Do we expect to see some of those solutions to come up in the future? We see that quite a bit now in markets like Australia, but that's more of a deregulated market. But maybe that's a good way to end the discussion is get the panelists' thoughts on solar and storage as an investment proposition in Indonesia.
Yeah, I think for the solar storage, as I mentioned, there is a growing demand for the storage. But I would say that particularly for Indonesia, it is still not suitable for the on-grid application where they already have connected to the grid. It is a lot of opportunity when we're talking about the off-grid. I mean, first for the rural electrification, and the second one where the industry is still very remote, where in Indonesia the case of that is really high. For example, for the remote mining that's still using the diesel genset, and they can start to introduce the renewable energy there with a very competitive cost of generation when we compare to the diesel genset. So those two elements, it's a really focused market. And we see also now there is a growing tender also for EPC from PLN for some island in eastern part of Indonesia, because PLN, I think, just signed also the loan agreement from ADB to finance this project. But this is going to be an EPC project. So I think for insular context, I would say for the island context, this hybrid involving energy storage is really key for the future development of the renewable energy.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think from our perspective, if we're looking at our development portfolio, about 50% of the projects have an element of storage built in. We think that initially that will be a relatively small component, looking to address the intermittency of solar plants. But in some grids, you see that there's a clear demand also for load shifting, auxiliary services to stabilize the grid. That probably needs some additional regulation to make that feasible. And there are quite a few learnings from other countries like the Philippines and some other markets where that is more developed currently. But for us, I think it's key going forward.
Yeah, on our side, I mean, again, focusing on the behind the meter on grid solution. As of today, we don't really see the storage as a competitive solution, and since there is a net metering being implemented in Indonesia, this is not a strong need for the kind of solution that we deploy on. On that note, talking about the net metering with PLN, I mean, just to mention an interesting indicator that PLN has revealed last week or something like this, where they mentioned that since they have put in place this net metering scheme, there has been 18 megawatt, 18, connected to the net metering scheme. So that gives, a perspective of how nascent and how new this market is. I mean, and to give another figure, I mean, we just been successful last month by signing industrial solar rooftop of 4.5 megawatts. So we are really at the beginning of the CNI solar market in Indonesia.
Thank you, Holnam. I think we run over by almost 10 minutes, so we should probably stop here. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion, very lively discussion. And Holnam, we'll pass it back over to you.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Daniel, thank you so much for your really well-structured panel discussion. And also, of course, thank you, Jeremy, thank you, Joe, thank you, Coleman. Many thanks for your really impressive discussion in the panel focusing on the renewable potential in Indonesia. And I think out of our audience must gain a lot of insights into the 10 gigawatt renewable energy growth potentials. And thanks again for your participation in such an international panel discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now let's continue the virtual roadshow to the topic of bankability of the large-scale solar projects in Indonesia. And Mr. Adolfo, the managing director of the project finance from Korean Development Bank, will be the keynote speaker of this session. Adolfo is currently the senior banker with 20-plus-year background in the structured and cooperative equity financing. He's also acting as an investor and developer globally for the large energy multinational. And he has extensive network of connects with CEOs, CFOs, and senior government officials. Hi, Adolfo. Please take control of your stage. Hello.
Hi, sorry. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay. Okay, good. Thanks again. Good morning. I trust that all of you are doing well and most of all staying safe. My name is Dindo Bueg, and I'm a managing director and co-head for project finance in Asia Pacific for Korea Development Bank. The market has been excited for quite some time now about the future of renewables, and I believe this excitement will continue to rise as governments accelerate the shift to clean energy. It is with honor to speak to you today and talk about how to evaluate the bankability of large-scale projects in Indonesia from a bank's perspective, particularly that of Korea Development Bank. Just to give you an introduction of KDB first, KDB has been very active in financing renewable power projects in the region. In fact, KDB has been one of the most active banks in project finance, where we have been ranked high in league tables and is backed by credit rating of AA from Standard & Poor's and AA2 from Moody's. We have around 107 offices around the world, including one in Jakarta, located the Energy Building in the Central Business District. Since 1994, when the Infrastructure Act was first introduced in Korea, KDB has been a pioneer and leader in the domestic project finance market. KDB continues to hold the dominant market share and rival position in Korea, both as advisor and lender. However, KDB has also been an active participant in global transactions in cooperation with commercial banks, multilaterals, ECAs, and other key players. In 2011, KDB decided to be more proactive to support overseas transactions with international and domestic clients, and as such, decided to put up a project finance office in Singapore. In 2012, I joined KDB, and since then we have closed a number of transactions. We cover power, renewables, energy, water, and the infrastructure sector. KDB has achieved a significant growth of its project finance activities worldwide in the past 5 years, and is committed to continue such development in the coming years. Since 2006, KDB closed over 132 projects overseas and building up an impressive track record. We have been expanding rapidly our project finance activity across all traditional sectors, particularly power and the renewables. Power and renewables have actually been the biggest share of our portfolio, with more than 1/3 of our entire assets. As I have indicated before, we have been focusing on renewables and other green projects. In December 2016, KDB became the first Korean entity to be accredited and is now acting as a Green Climate Fund implementing agency. Green Climate Fund is a fund established to assist developing countries to counter climate change. As mentioned previously, our first overseas project finance team was first established in Singapore due to its strategic location in Southeast Asia. It is not surprising then that Southeast Asia is a key focus of KDB's project finance franchise. KDB has financed a number of high-profile projects in Southeast Asia since we started our office in Singapore. This includes conventional power and renewables, LNG, regas, and liquefaction, refiners, and petrochemicals. In particular, Indonesia has been one of our key and favorite countries where we closed a number of projects. For us at KDB, Indonesia offers exciting opportunities not only to us, but also to international developers and suppliers because of its large economy, being the largest in Southeast Asia, and accounting for around 2/5 of the region's energy consumption. Indonesia's large population and strong domestic demand is contributing to its positive growth outlook. Energy demand across the country's more than 17,000 islands could increase by 4/5, and electricity demand could triple between 2015 and 2030. Investment news in the Indonesian infrastructure has been a common sight in the press. Indonesia aims to invest around $430 billion in infrastructure from this year to 2024. While the reliance on domestic coal and imported petroleum products has grown, Indonesia started adding more renewables to its energy mix. There are, however, some challenges and news reports and doubts on whether Indonesia can actually reach their target in 2025. A number of challenges has provided some deterrent to some investors. One of the major barriers to renewable energy investment is clarity over the project pipeline. This stems from the recent changes in Indonesia's planned power capacity additions. Another challenge is on whether the current tariff regime is sufficient to investors. Tariffs for solar and wind energy are subject to maximum benchmark tariff, which vary from region to region and are linked to PLN's average cost of power procurement. The third challenge is the local content requirement, given the absence of vertical integration in the domestic industry and the lack of skill and low levels of capacity utilization, given the low levels of investment in this sector. This reduces the domestic industry's cost competitiveness. The fourth challenge is the fragmented nature of Indonesia's grid infrastructure. Constraints in the transmission system has required PLN to impose a limit of 10% variable renewable energy penetration from the daytime peak to ensure grid stability. Another challenge is the risk in acquiring land. land acquisition has been a challenge for infrastructure projects in general, which causes a lot of delays. Shortage of skilled manpower is another challenge that investors face. Finally, a number of renewable projects have troubles getting financing, and this is particularly true for small projects where they might be using a different kind of PPA. And also for most banks, they would have a minimum amount of debt that they would look out at. Anything smaller than that amount would not qualify for approval. Given these challenges, the government aims to jumpstart stalled renewables energy project through a recently issued regulation and hope to achieve 23% renewable energy use by 2025 and 31% by 2050. These changes include the permission for PLN to carry out direct appointments as opposed to tender process. This is beneficial particularly if there's only one candidate IPP for the relevant area. Another change is the removal of the Build, Own, Operate, Transfer, or BOOT scheme, and allowed investors to adopt a BOO scheme, which has a direct impact on the tariff level, which can be offered by developers. The third positive development is the expansion of the obligations for PLN to prioritize the electricity generated from renewable IPPs on a must-run basis. Finally, there are some reports that the government will soon introduce a regulation aiming to simplify renewable tariffs, which may encourage greater investment in the sector. Notwithstanding the debate on whether these new policies will push Indonesia to reaching the target in 2025, Indonesia is still expected to be one of the key drivers of solar installations in Southeast Asia. To date, most solar energy project developments in Indonesia revolve around extending sustainable energy access to remote off-grid communities by deploying solar home systems or solar plus storage micro or mini grids. However, in order to drive installations in the country, competitive solar production is needed. The biggest opportunity is utility-scale solar projects. If Indonesia's large-scale utility-scale solar plants, economies of scale can be achieved, which will result in a more competitive solar production cost. Indonesia does not have many utility-scale PV plants as compared to its Southeast Asian neighbors. However, in 2018, ADB had provided roughly $40 million project financing package for Vina Energy to build 4 solar plants in eastern Indonesia, which are said to be Indonesia's first utility-scale PV plants. This is the first batch of utility-scale greenfield solar power projects developed by the private sector to successfully close using limited recourse financing. In July 2019, they achieved commercial operation for their 3 Lombok solar projects amounting to 21 megawatts. In September 2019, their 21 megawatt Minut solar project, which is the largest ground-mounted solar project in Indonesia, also achieved full commercial operation. Another utility-scale solar PV in Indonesia is the 10.8 megawatt Gorontalo solar PV plant by Quantum Energy, which was commissioned early this year. Projects in the pipeline include Masdar's 170 megawatt Cirata offshore solar project. Masdar signed a PPA with PLN to develop the country's first floating PV plant amounting to 170 megawatt at Cirata Reservoir in West Java. I understand that they have put together a small group of banks to finance the project on a 70-30 debt equity ratio. It is set to reach commercial operation in early 2022. Another deal that is currently in progress and under bidding is the Indonesia Solar Program. This transaction will involve 4 solar projects to be located at West Sumatra, West Java, Kalimantan, and Lampung. Indonesia will own 51% of the project, while other 49% currently being bidded out to interested parties. I understand that this is well participated and they already have chosen a preferred bidder. So will these projects in the pipeline and future large-scale projects in the future be bankable? Good news is that there's been a long history, a number of power projects that have been project financed, especially when the long form of PPA is used, and have some of them listed here. Indonesian power projects have largely been financed by international lenders with strong support from export credit agencies or by multilaterals like ADB or IFC. KDB is one of these banks who has actively closed financing for power plant projects in Indonesia. We have financed close to 2,500 megawatt of power projects in the country. Just this month, we acted as coordinating bank and closed Jawa 9 and 10, which will be one of the biggest power plants in the Java Valley grid. So how do we assess the bankability of a power project, and in particular, a large-scale solar power project? What is bankable? We have a different definition for bankers, especially in the project finance field. Let me highlight bankers and equity investors view bankability in a different way. Banks typically emphasize the impact of stable cash flow on the project's long-term debt service. Equity investors tend to focus on their investment return and their portfolio strategies. Yet to ensure project soundness, diligence in legal, technical, and economic matters are necessary for both stakeholders. For us in the banking sector, we will be looking at the combination of the project risk and risk-adjusted return when we make a decision on whether to finance a project. For us at KDB, we review several transactions every month. A number of them get rejected right away, and a few pass our first screening, and some of these pass on to our final credit approval, certifying the bankability of the project, at least from our point of view. I say our point of view because bankability is a set of criteria independently defined by each bank or group of banks. Each bank will have their own risk appetite. One project is bankable to one bank, but may not be bankable to another bank. For us at KDB, we basically have three screening grades. First screening is done by our originators. This is the first stage of our selection process. The second stage of screening will be data for management, and the last and final one will be data for credit group or committee. Note that every bank would have their own selection process. We assess qualitative and quantitative risk. Banks finance solar projects by following a more or less standardized project assessment process. The process starts with client discussion, sometimes with the sponsors themselves, or sometimes with their financial advisor or one of their underwriting banks, if you are coming in a syndication. A first qualitative screening of the available information will then be conducted. Initial assessment of project parties and key projects and financing terms will then be made. Key parties will include the equity investors, EPC, O&M, and off-taker, and if there are any guarantors. Key project terms will include the PPA, technology, and the location. Key financing terms will include tenor of the loan, pricing, and if there will be some credit enhancements or not. If the initial assessments are acceptable, in the second step, a more detailed due diligence of the underlying fundamentals of the project will be conducted. A thorough review will be done on each of the value chain as shown in this project structure. We will be looking at each project risk in more detail. There will be a number of project risks that we'll be looking at. On the top of our risk will be the sponsors, the off-takers, the technology, and construction. And if there are any credit enhancements, such as the presence of ECAs or multilaterals, or guarantees to be provided by a third party. Our ability to assess the project risk will be supported by due diligence reports that are provided by independent consultants. Due diligence reports will cover various topics such as legal, technical, insurance, market, environmental, and social. The due diligence will also include a financial model that will be able to evaluate the robustness of the project. The model would need to show compliance with various criteria that depend on the policy of a particular bank, such as a minimum DSCR. In order to come up with due diligence reports, our consultants will review various project agreements that includes a PPA, the EPC contract, the O&M contract, the shareholding contract, among others. Traditionally, the long-form PPAs in Indonesia has been bankable, as shown by the long list of thermal power projects that have been project financed. We would hope and expect that more or less the PPAs for these upcoming utility-scale solar power projects will benefit from the same features. The market has come to expect key features such as relief for political force majeure and grid-related force majeure. which will include deemed commissioning and dispatch. It is also expected that PLN will be subject to take-or-pay commitments for the terms of the PPA, and that comprehensive termination payments in the manner typically expected for emerging markets PPAs in the region will be provided. Other features will include change of law, dispute resolution, and robust tariff regime that will be sufficient to provide adequate cover on debt service. A default risk assessment and rating will then be performed after the review of all the risks. Each bank will have their own default risk and rating model to come up with the appropriate credit rating for the project. We will then assess the pricing of the transaction as well as the tenor of the loan and see if they will be able to provide a satisfactory rating for the project. Banks will have their own criteria for risk-adjusted return on capital. Banks will then give their proposed pricing, or alternatively, they will just say yes or no to a pricing proposed by the sponsor or financial advisor or underwriter. Banks will also have to ensure that the bankable financing term sheet is available, which they could present to their respective credit committee. Key financing terms will have to be negotiated with the client. It will include loan amount, financial covenants such as base case DSCR, minimum DSCR, the gearing, tenor, and pricing. Other provisions will include other undertakings, representations, events of defaults, CPs, and prepayments. After the internal credit committee has approved the requested loan, financing documents will have to be executed. This includes facility agreements, security agreements, intercreditor agreements, direct agreements with third parties. All of these documents will be carefully reviewed. The good news is that we have lots of international law firms that have tons of experience in documenting project finance arrangements in Indonesia. Of course, there are some peculiarities, but all in all, with the experience of PLN, the lawyers, the bankers, as well as with the various reputable sponsors, I am confident that financing documents can be made satisfactorily to all parties, and in particularly the banks. Sources of funding liquidity. Previous projects have been project financed mostly by international banks, export credit agencies, and multilateral agencies. In particularly, for big projects, liquidity will definitely be enhanced with the presence of ECAs or multilateral banks with their extended political risk guarantees. We have also seen domestic banks participating in some of the thermal power projects financing. In our recently financed Java 9 and 10, financing was received from international and domestic banks, together with an export credit agency. It is expected that project finance will continue to be the main structure for infrastructure projects in Indonesia. As a conclusion, there is no lack of financing for renewable projects. With more banks retreating from coal-fired power projects, more focus is now being put on renewable power projects. There is also a long history of project finance power projects in Indonesia. There is, however, a lack of scalable solar PV projects of sufficient size and quality that meet the bankability standards, and we hope that more policies are put in place to encourage more investments. And finally, appropriate structuring, mitigation of project risk, and alignment of the interests of all parties concerned is utmost important to the bankability of the project. Thank you very much for your attention. Terima kasih. If you have any questions or inquiries about any projects, not only in Indonesia, but anywhere in Asia Pacific, you may contact me at my email address listed here. Stay safe, and wishing all of you the very best for the year 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dindo. Thank you for sharing the detailed information about the bankability of the large-scale solar projects in Indonesia. And also, Mr. Dindo, during your presentation, we've also received so many questions from our online audience, and I would like to pick one of the questions from Mr. Wayman to ask you. So Mr. Wayman want to ask you, like, he want to know in the tariff, which one is cheaper in BOO and the BOT project schemes?
Well, usually the BAO should be cheaper because you don't have to transfer the project to PLN. So normally you would expect a cheaper price if you use a BAO.
Okay, all right. So many thanks for your really specific answer, Mr. Dindo. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Now let's move on our final stop in this morning project, the challenge session. So in this session, the CEO of PT Randant Atima Internesco, Safwan Farisi, will shine light on the solar project challenge in Indonesia. Mr. Safwan Farisi is also the managing director of the PT Supraco Lines, and also serves as the chairman and also commissioner at PT Supraco Indonesia and the PT Sarik Mara P Thermal Power. Hi, Safwan. Please take control of your stage.
Thank you, Mr. Honam. Good morning, everybody. This is my last session. I think I just try to make some input for you so you have a more bigger figure regarding the Indonesian market for the solar PV. Let me start my share screen first. Thank you. Okay, let me introduce that the Radian Utami Intensco first. That our company actually established 45 years ago.
Hello, Mr. Safwan. I'm
Yes?
sorry to interrupt you. All right, so it's in full display right now. Okay, you can continue.
Have you heard my voice? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you well because
Okay,
your
thank
screen wasn't in full display right now, so I just want to have double check. So
Okay,
please
so
continue.
let me introduce first regarding the Radian Utama Intensco Tbk, that we are the public listed company. First, we are established in 1975, 45 years ago. Our first initial business is oil and gas business actually. So this is our office. So we have the rig, onshore rig actually, 13 onshore rig, and we have the facility offshore production. It's around the delivered 100 MMBtu gas, natural gas to the East Java. It's around 240 megawatts for the fall. Now, since 5 years ago, we expand our business more the green and to be the renewable energy business. So this is the meaning. We have the solar PV and we have our prime energy is the sun. This is the sunflower. We also the member of Executive Committee ASEAN Photovoltaic Industry Association. So our agenda today just introduction, and I just explained why renewable energy have a big opportunity in Indonesia. And we have the current implementation in renewable energy and the solar energy is already explained in the discussion, in the first discussion. And we have the ACEWO there, ACEWO also Mr. Komang is our partner. Current implementation and challenges in residential market, challenges in utilities and industrial market, and this is an opportunity, and we are close with the lesson learned from our ASEAN country from Vietnam. So let me introduce that actually that our renewable business is starting in the geothermal business. So we have the one big project in the North Sumatra, geothermal with Sorik Merapi. So we have consortium there, Radian is one of this consortium. And now we already delivered 90 megawatts with the target is 240 megawatts. And regarding the solar project, this is a small scale compared to the geothermal. So this number just explained, we try to make a more higher and scalable project for solar PV. We also the APVIA member as a Radian Utama since the last month. And I think this is the snapshot regarding the Indonesia. I think I already explained with every presenter that we are actually the island country, 17,500 island, and we are the world's largest island country. We are 7 landers for the combined sea and land area. Our population is very big, 270 million, the world's fourth most populous country. Our GDP rate, growth rate is the 3%. Energy consumption is 5.9%. And we also signed the Paris Agreement. We have the aims to reduce our CO2 emission by 29% compared to 2015. This is the big problem. Renewable energy in power, only 1% of primary energy consumption. Increased by 7% in 2016 and above the 10 years average for the 4.7. There is some regulation. I will explain more detail after this. Sorry in bahasa Indonesia, but I just explained that our government have the program from the until 2040, from the 2015. With this number in this chart, we will show that we have the 23% in renewable energy in 2025. I will explain how much the fact of the current renewable energy already implemented and it will be achieved or not, like the prepare. But this is just to show that in this area, we need to now, we consume the 1.9 billion oil per day in 2025. Now we are consume actually 1.6 billion barrel oil per day. And in this area, we will also consume almost double in 2050, almost the 4 million barrel oil per day. With this chart, I just show you that how much our own production of the oil. We just focus in the oil business, oil the target. In this chart, we explain in the 2050, we only produce by our own country is only 69,000 barrel compared to the 4 million barrel oil that we need to consume by our own people. So it means we have to be import. If we are import, we'll check we have a money or not. How about our trade balance of the energy? In this picture, we will show that within this year we are in the zero condition. Our import is the same with our export, but after that, it will be negative for the trade energy import bill. So it means that we don't have the money to import a lot of crude oil and gas if we have to consume by our own country. So this is the challenge, and so we have to prepare our own energy without import. That's the trigger for the renewable energy, isn't it? And we just show you regarding our own consumption, annual electricity use in Indonesia. We only use now is around 1,100 kilowatt hours per capita. So we're still here. And compared to the Malaysia is almost the 5,000 kilowatt hour per capita, and Singapore is 8,000, almost the 9,000 kilowatt hour per capita. So we still had a lot of room to grow. And I mean, our government have the target in 2024 will be increased from the 1,100 kilowatt hours to be the 1,400. And we will see regarding the Indonesia, almost only the Java Island are centralized of the electricity. So even though we have a program to electricity the whole our country, but it's still not yet provide to the whole the people. So it means because the island country is very hard to achieve, because something the small island is only not a lot of people there. So I think this is a trigger for Indonesia. I think one of the solution may be the high voltage DC or high voltage LC for this, but there is the situation in Indonesia. And this is the Minister Research of Technology statement on Friday, 20th November, that he says that our fossil fuel is declining and our consumption is increasing. So Indonesia will be the net fuel importer. And it will have a problem with our trade balance for our economical. So to import the fuel oil. And he said that here, that renewable energy is the only solution to help our economy. There is this statement just last week, I think. So we will see the current implementation of renewable energy and solar energy. So this is just to go here, this is the 5 years ago. So it should be the 0.35 gigawatt peak, the peak, and and potential is 200 gigawatt peak. So it's very far from not developed by our government. And regarding the target for renewable energy, so we have the target for the 23, but I think if business as usual projection, we will run only the 12%. So we have the very hard to achieve this target. So we should be intervention scenario from government. And this is the forecast for new solar capacity installation from the Lantau Group, Southeast Asia Solar. So we will see here Indonesia, the forecast is only 350, and it is true that we only achieved this 350. Compared to Vietnam, their forecast almost the 800, more than 800, but now they have the 5 gigawatts. So what happened with the Vietnam, we will check and we will discuss after that. And this is the last Minister Energy Mineral Resources Regulation number 16, 2020, just last September 2020. They have the table there that show that how much electricity and solar PV installed. And we'll see this is the target, this is the realization, this is the target, realization. All the realization is below the target. And the total, the realization is around the 350 megawatts. This is the realization. Just at the same regulation number 16, 2020, we will see there is some table for the coal, just for comparison. So we will see that for the coal, the whole realization is higher than the target. So this is in the million tons. So I think in the 2019, for the 4 million tons target, we produce 600 million tons. So this is for the coal compared to the solar PV. So you can imagine what happened in our country. So the lagging behind due to this lack of political will, regulation framework and incentive, market barriers, adopt on grid. There is also the PLN always say that we need the smart grid, your solar PV is intermittent, you need the battery, but the high rate, human resource readiness. And the bankers always say that Indonesia is the frontier market, risk and such as attractive in terms of investment. I think Mr. Dindo explained there's a lot of review for if we need to get some loan from the bank. So I think research from the Essential Service Reform ESR explained that solar energy is the obvious answer to achieve our renewable energy target because easy to deploy to many locations in Indonesia. I think there is the answer for Indonesia actually. So we will check. There is the two market in Indonesia. First is residential market, and for the other is utility and industrial market. I think this is some research in the Jakarta and the Surabaya. In the two big cities in Indonesia, there is almost the 200 gigawatts potential market. From where? Because of all that, Indonesia is the big population, and our lifestyle is we are the landed house. Everybody just want to stay in the landed house, not go to the apartment style. So this is almost, it will be implemented that we have a lot of rooftop to install in the solar. And in this survey, it'll be interesting that the people who install the solar PV at the moment is only the early adopters people. It's only the 2% of the population. After the early adopters, you will have the early followers. There are people that eager to install the solar PV as long as there is the reasonable for us. So we will check what is the reasonable from them. Also it's the same. So it means that if we can encourage the early followers to install, it will be the 7 times at least increase for the solar PV at the rooftop. So they said that all the people said that we need the financial support. It means that we don't need the capex is too big. Is it possible that we install the capex through our saving from our electricity? And this is our electricity saving, government incentive. And they also need the net metering rate at least 101. It means that now our net metering rate is a discounted 35% discount. So this is, if we can handle this issue to the early followers, so it will be 7 times market growth actually. And then challenges in the utilities and industrial market, I think this is we discussed regarding the big scale. And I think that is already discussed before, that we have the solar regulatory problem, unworkable project requirement, financial problem. First of all, we'll check some regulation. Solar problem in Indonesia. The first of all, in 2013, that we have the rate is 25 cents until 30 cents. And in the 2016, our rate is declining for 14 until 25 cents. And after that, in the 2017, we changed to the BPP, I mean the National Electricity Supply Cost. So the rate will be the 4.8, it's around the 5 cents until 14 cents, depending on the location. And after that, you have the electricity import discounted the 35%, and you have the BOT issue here, and you also have the parallel charge issue. Okay, parallel charge. So let me explain later on what is the BOT. Just already explained, but let me just make some illustration after that. Regarding the BPP, so it means that this is the average of the BPP, I mean the electricity cost in Indonesia. But you have to be considered that BPP is developed average by the fossil fuel. So it's not really fair to compare that solar renewable energy with our current fossil fuel, because fossil fuel, you have the big scale, and you have also the infrastructure for the 40 years already compared to the renewable energy. But they have to be considered that we have the social impact, clean energy impact, environmental impact. They have to make calculation of this. So in this BPP, so we just only possible to install in the isolated area, isolated island, but you have to be considered that in this area, the infrastructure is very, very undeveloped. So the cost also high. So again, it will be a problem for the financing. And BOT scheme, I think I already explained by KDB Bank also, that everybody here, that we have the high level risk associated with land acquisition. PLN doesn't provide real guidance. BOT increase upfront cash. There is some question from the audience before. And local content regulation. Yes, it is correct that we have the 40% in the local content regulation, especially for contract with government. So the only way to handle this is we can install in industrial market. And this is I think this is the situation of the project. Yes, yes, KDB explained the new project is much higher, but the big scale project also explained that the rate is very low. I think it's only the 4 cents, something like that. And this is, at least they need if you go to the bank, they always say, is it possible you have at least the 25 or 50 megawatts? Because if there is the scale is very low, it will be the traditional corporate financing. Instead, we have to make the equity. The bank will give us the high interest rate, and then we have to compete with the fossil fuel BPP, the cost. So it will be not economical. So there is a problem why the solar PV is not growth in Indonesia. Regarding the opportunity, yes, I think government has made much improvement in this situation. So they make some change of the regulation, and everybody just waiting for the feed-in tariffs, and we have a lot of population, and solar market rooftop is starting to grow, but still the early adopter stage. So in the red colors, there is the new regulation that revised regarding the BOT to BOO and revised the parallel charge. So what is the parallel charge? This is some illustration. If you want to install in the sub-industrial market and you want to install the 10 megawatts, so the PLN will charge the factory or industrial, at least the minimum charge is the 40 hours multiplied by the installed capacity and then electricity tariff. So it depends on, sometimes it have the 7 cent until the 7 cent until 10 cents. So monthly, the factory should be paid to PLN just for the PLR charge. Additional cost is the 20,000 until the 40,000. And this is already revised, the 40 hours changed to be 5 hours. So the monthly rate is more reasonable. And if the BOT illustration, there is some question for the audience that is it the BOT should be higher compared to the BO, because let's assume that you need to make the IPP in the Bali Island, 10 megawatts for 20 years. Let's say solar power investment, you have the 800,000 multiplied by the 10, so you have the 8 million. But this is the land acquisition cost. So at least assume that you need the 10,000 square meter for 1 megawatt. And at Bali, you have the $100 per square meter. So you need the 10 million US dollar for buy the land. And then you have to compete less than, you have to follow the regulation. Your price is maximum 85% compared to the current cost in Bali. So in Bali is the 6.8 cents. So you have minus 15%, that is your maximum. So how come you buy the land, you install, and then at the end of the project, you will give all the land to the PLN. I think the land is much higher value compared to our own facility for the solar PV. This is already revised by government back to BO scheme. So my last slide is this is the lesson learned from Vietnam. The solar capacity grew from only 0.1 gigawatt to 5.4 gigawatt in only 2 years. Vietnam has benefited greatly from the supporting pricing policy. They have the feed-in tariff from government. With that noted, Indonesia coming present regulation on renewable tariff and procurement of renewable is expected to bring more investment with an attractive VIT and more government support. I think, thank you very much for you all. And if you want, you can send me the email to me and we can discuss further regarding this. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Mr. Sofwan, and very much for your phenomenal speech on the solar project challenge in Indonesia based on the experience of VD Brandon Utuma TBK. And I think all of our audience has gained a lot of inspiration from your thought contribution in this field. And also regarding the question, because we are running out of the time, I think you can answer the question afterwards or the question in the Q&A box after the morning session. And again, thank you so much for your participation. And
thank you very much for all.
Thank you. So currently, this is pretty much all about the ASEAN Clean Energy Week's morning session. And thank you so much for staying with us in this whole morning. And please kindly enjoy your Thanksgiving lunch. Have a really nice rest. And we'll be waiting for you at 2 p.m. in the same live studio where more exclusive insights will be presented by the other 8 distinguished speakers. And bye-bye.